And we're back. Hi, Tia.
We are back and we are live. Hi, Peter. Long time no see, a full 30 seconds for
A
the
full 30
countdown.
seconds, but in the end, what really counts is today's episode. Today's episode is gonna be, it's very up close and personal. What does it mean?
AI transparency, up close and personal. It means that, well, we are doing basically everything the same, but we are also having another guest with us, and this guest will talk a lot about AI transparency. She will clarify a lot of misconceptions. We are very thrilled that she's here. She's sitting in the backstage, and it's Shoshana Rosenberg. Shoshana is a leading voice in AI governance. She co founded logical AI governance as well as women in AI governance. Um, and she will talk to us about AI transparency, AI explainability, interpretability, differences, similarities between the two. And all of that is coming in roughly 30 minutes.
That sounds great. I'm really looking forward to hearing from her and chatting with her. And so, I mean, what's up next? Probably same
What's up
procedure as
next? Same procedure as always. We have to do some advertising, just can't help it. So, apropos advertising, we wrote a book. We wrote a book a few months ago. The book is up for sales. It's up for sales via publisher's site. It's up for sales via Amazon. It can be ordered as an ebook. It can be ordered as a physical copy. We gained a lot of really nice feedback from really nice people. We always look forward to feedback. So please feel free to shoot any that you have and, order the book if you haven't already.
it's
That's the
not going to
first
be
update.
available everywhere on as a hard copy. So in some regions of the world,
Good
because
point.
of the snail mail situation and the lack of a distribution system of books, obviously, it's only available as an ebook, unfortunately. But I mean, you'll figure it out.
Exactly. And second important announcement, the book tour continues, or rather restarts again. We had to cancel Brussels due to various personal reasons. However, we are taking Munich very seriously now, and it is scheduled for the 6th of February, so do register. The tickets are up for sale as of yesterday. And with those two updates, or do you have anything further to add before I kick off?
No, really. I'm extremely excited that we can finally start the book tour, and it's not just the book and stuff like that, but it
Training.
is actual training, deep dives. And even though we are being criticized by some, I just received the feedback form from one of the presentations that we gave, and they said, well, yeah, it's it was really deep. So we'll have to figure out how to deal with that with the audience. And but in general,
No, that's why I think we are at the right spot. I think our audience knows
yeah,
that we like to go deep into things, and that's what we are going to do. 6 hours live, deep dives, very complex questions. We are not doing it surface level. You guys can read the AI Act. We do not need to tell you what is in it. We are here to discuss with you how we can, actually make things, set things up, and get things running.
we have already like cool registrants, so really cool people with a lot of experience in, for instance, the field of medical device regulation. So expect even deeper deep dives then. So cool. But yeah, please proceed.
Yeah. And now to finally get to our episode, today we, well, as an exception, do not have the deep dive, but just have the rant. However, for that reason, I could, or I didn't decide to. I could. I was allowed to go extra deep for the AI rant and take a bit more of your time ranting about all the things that happened. And this month, I had a wide array of topics I could talk about. Everything from videos of humanoid robots strolling the streets of Shenzhen, China. And when I say strolling, what I actually mean is kind of Terminator like stomping. But hey, progress is progress, I guess. And despite some accusations and the weird looks of the video, CGI question mark, apparently the thing was fact checked and is confirmedly not AI generated. So these things are, important to note nowadays. And these things that you can see in this tweet and on the slide are actually walking around the streets. It's slightly concerning, or it sounds slightly concerning when you hear them stomping around, but hey, yay, progress. Um, or I could maybe be talking about holiday spending rising nearly 9% as a consequence of deep discounts and AI-powered chatbots fueling purchases, according to Adobe data. So the retail AI effects aim to signify AI-powered shopping using assistants such as ChatGPT and their competitors. So apparently, traffic to retail sites that came from generative AI-powered chatbots, and that does not include site-specific chatbots that are on retail sites, so only external chatbots, shot up to 1,300% compared to the year ago holiday season, as more shoppers appear to have turned to technology to look for gift ideas and kind of also direct themselves to cheaper prices. Whether chatbots are the best way to do that, I'm not sure, but hey, 1,300% is an impressive surge, I can tell you that. Um, or I could also be talking about Chinese NERGZES as well as US-based OMI, which are starting to read thoughts. Of course, one for a price tag, other for medical purposes. Give the government a bit of time to figure it out. Um, Apparently, in August 2024, neurosurgeons at Huashan Hospital, which is affiliated with Fudan University, implanted a 256 channel high throughout flexible brain computing device. The device was designed by the Shanghai based NeuroXas and was implanted into a 21-year-old female patient with epilepsy who had a space occupying lesion in the motor area of her brain, and they apparently achieved astonishing results. I'm not sure why this is breaking news now when it was implanted in August, but I might have missed something here. Anyhow, she was one of the two trial patients who have demonstrated the prowess of the BCI technology using their minds to control software, pick up objects, operate a digital avatar through speech, and converse with an AI model, and all of that in Chinese, which was unprecedented until now due to the complex Chinese characters that are used in their language. On the other hand, when it comes to OMI, oops, sorry. When it comes to OMI, on the other hand, the founder Nikita Shevchenko's long-term goal is to have OMI read the brain so it can figure out what you're thinking about. Unlike Neuralink's brain-computer interface, which requires someone actually putting something into your brain, Shevchenko wants to accomplish this by continually adding more electrodes to the head. So far, he was able to have a system construct two words. Um, well, okay, a long way to go and a long way from NERGZES and the Chinese. Um, but hey, when he puts all those electrodes that he wants to put on you, I'm sure that he will get it as well. Anyhow, this continues the trend of AI always listening, always on type of wearable devices, some of which we already featured in some of the previous episodes, and we'll be following these developments closely. Um, and we can end this brief intro of all the things that I could be ranting about with fake news summaries by Apple AI. So their product was meant to summarize breaking news notifications, which are kind of already summarized because they are notifications. But okay. And they have in some instances invented entirely false claims summarizing these usually two-sentence notifications. Ouch. So the BBC first complained to the tech giant about its journalism being misrepresented in December, but Apple did not respond until Monday last week. Holidays, what can you do? When it said it was working to clarify that the summaries were AI generated, because, stating that an AI generated thing, that it is an AI generated thing on top of the notification is clearly just a very complex feature to build into this. Um, Anyhow, BBC complained after an AI generated summary of its headline falsely told some readers that Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, had shot himself. The actual notification, however, just called Luigi the shooting suspect, but close enough. Last Friday, Apple's AI inaccurately summarized notifications again to claim that Luke Litter and won the PDC World Darts Championship, plot twist, before the championship began, as well as that the Spanish tennis star Rafael Nadal had come out as gay. Potatoes, potatoes, good. And speaking of maybe slightly higher stakes of fake news, already in November, a ProPublica journalist highlighted erroneous Apple AI summaries of alerts from the New York Times app. So on the 21st of November, three articles on different topics from the New York Times were grouped together in one notification, with one part reading Netanyahu arrested, referring to the Israeli prime minister, of course. It was inaccurately summarizing an actual news which said that the criminal court issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. But, again, details, arrest warrant, being arrested, same thing. And speaking of fake news, or rather unintentionally fake news, this time, however, without any recklessness involved, um, remember how TechCrunch reported that the Irish data protection watchdog made inquiries about X's unlawful and untransparent data processing practices, and then dropped the investigation? As X said, cross my heart, hope to die. We will stop it in the future. Yeah, well, they didn't. Shocker, I know. As I recently found out, that is still the one single option in my privacy policy that was per default turned on for the purposes of training and improving no one other than Grok, of course. Um, it appears that after launching the first version, this was, of course, not enough. So we need some more data, and it better be fresh. They really do remind me sometimes of Gollum from, Lord of the Rings. Just can't let all that invaluable data go when we could use it to make money. My precious. Yes. And if you're wondering what the next big things are, at least, in Grok X Musk universe, it is one, an app, which, at least according to the first reviews, appears to be paying off, but that might be due to the fact that it's usually mostly the hardcore fans that, download it straight away. And
You
second,
mean bot?
yeah, well, they did gradually increase reviews, so I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here, okay? And second, they are adding fun and unhinged modes to Grok, and this is where it gets really fun. I'm not sure about unhinged. So, according to their own XAI FAQs, Grok is designed to answer almost any questions with a touch of wit and humor. And on top of that, the fun mode has a rebellious streak and incorporates jokes, making it unique and entertaining. And the unhinged mode, on the other hand, is intended to be objectionable, inappropriate, and offensive, much like an amateur stand up comic who is still learning the craft. Now, I, for one, am not sure what is going on with these modes, though I can't access them, but I am also not a pro subscribed whatever user, so I might never actually, access them. Sad, I know, I'm devastated. But most news outlets, as well as Grok itself, by the way, so appear and their AI FAQs, by the way, seem to be of the opinion that this unhinged mode is not yet available. However, some X users are either trying to be very funny and being very creative with advertising their companies, or they already have access to the unhinged mode, apparently through the premium subscription. And the first screenshots I found are, well, quite underwhelming, I'd say. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you or to myself. I get a fair amount of justified criticism from my mom for, using cuss words and inappropriate language, but this is another level. Um, if this is their idea of a provocative and edgy chatbot, I can only say that these guys are even closer to being teenagers than what I originally suspected. One user summarized it nicely in the response to this post. So Tom Dotcha writes, "So it sounds like a kid who learned to curse back in the 2000s. Nice work, Elon, real edgy." Um, by the way, for anyone just listening, I'm not having a recording of reading the thing out loud on the internet, so you'll have to go check it out for yourselves. Moving on. Disclaimer, the following news is quite outdated, but I went into a rabbit hole and now you're all my right and eyes in it. So on a semi-connected but equally sad note, have you ever wondered why, regardless of whether you follow the guy or not, the first thing you see whenever you access X is at least one Musk tweet? Well, that, my friends, is there by design, as was also kind of publicly shared by no one other than Musk himself in this personal opinion disclaimer, quite disgusting tweet from February 2023. And by the way, I'm not the only one disgusted. The comment section was going wild on this one. With users asking what is wrong with Elon and saying that he's gross. And these are all, by the way, consecutive comments. So the overwhelming opinion was, yeah, not great. Apparently, and rather unsurprisingly, Musk's popularity was and probably still is, we just don't know it, in rapid decline following his Twitter acquisition. Let's just briefly remember, his poll when he asked if he should step down as CEO, and after 57 people voted yes in a tweet poll viewed by 365 million people, he still, again, unsurprisingly, didn't step down. According to his own comment to the post, he's just waiting to find someone foolish enough to take over, and he will then focus on software. I guess there is just no one so foolish out there, is there? Anyhow,
Grok
back to
Grok is actually calling him a welfare queen. I just asked Grok, so because he relies heavily on subsidies, governmental subsidies. So
that's
there's that. Thank
weird.
you.
Okay. But back to Musk's declining popularity. So, two engineers were fired when they told him that there was no artificial restrictions or meddlings with the algorithm pushing down his popularity. And that people simply engaged with his posts less. This was then turned into number one problem that the engineers were supposed to devote all their time to. Not all their working time, all their time. More about that in a sec. And by the way, just as a fun fact, at the same time, Twitter usage in the United States in general has declined almost 9% since Musk takeover. Just saying. But back to Musk and the whole situation. So according to Wired, the whole thing suffered a sort of an internal combustion after Biden's tweet about the Super Bowl got more engagement than Musk's. So to be more specific, Biden's tweet in which he said he would be supporting his wife and rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles generated nearly 29 million impressions. And Musk, who also tweeted his support for the Eagles, generated a little more than 9.1 million impressions. So 20 million less. Before deleting the tweet in apparent frustration, which was also fact checked, by the way, the whole thing escalated into being number one problem at X. So as a consequence, late already on Sunday, so game day night, same day, Musk addressed his team in person, and roughly 80 people were pulled in to work on a project on a Sunday night, which had quickly become priority number one at the company. And employees worked throughout the night investigating various hypotheses about why Musk's tweets weren't reaching as many people as he thought they should, and testing out possible solutions. At 2:36 on Monday morning, James Musk, the cousin of Twitter CEO, sent an urgent message to all Twitter engineers. We are debugging an issue with engagement across the platform. So within a day, the consequence of that meeting became painfully apparent as Twitter users opened the app to find that Musk's posts overwhelmed their ranked timeline. After Musk threatened to fire the remaining of his engineers, because he already fired the two who told him that there's no objective issue with his tweets getting less attention, they built a system to, designed to ensure that Musk's tweets and Musk's alone benefit from previously unheard of promotion of his tweets to the entire user base. So by Monday afternoon, the problem had been fixed. Twitter deployed code to automatically greenlight all of Musk's tweets, and the algorithm now artificially boosted Musk's tweets by a factor of 1,000, a constant score that ensured his tweets ranked higher than anyone else's in the feed. Um, Internally, by the way, this was called a power user multiplier, although it only applied to Elon Musk. Anyhow, after his timeline takeover caused an uproar on that same Monday, he seemed to suggest that changes, might be in progress, in a tweet, of course, saying, please stay tuned while we make adjustments to the algorithm. The artificial boosts applied to his account, however, remain in place, although the factor is now lower than 1,000. Now, the reason why I went into this rabbit hole and back to reality. The reality in which not only are oftentimes incorrect statements and fake news spread via X, but Musk himself and or his buddies are the ones spreading them. So let's, remember the time when Haitians were eating pets in Ohio. Let's remember the statements against the UK Labour Party, etc. And let's remember the very recent development in this reality that we live in which Musk live streams with the leader of the German extremist party AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. Now, I am very open-minded for an immigrant, probably more open-minded than I should be for these types of things. But Musk, who has engineered the X algorithm to boost his own tweets, can with a single retweet, such as, this is interesting, or an emoji, put on a post by an anonymous or relatively obscure right-wing X account, put that particular tweet in front of 210 million of his followers, plus more because he gets recommended by a factor of 1,000. So that is just his followers is more than 5 times the population of Canada. So when he live streams with a leader of a party, that has ripple effects, very direct ones. And when this billionaire, not bound by any type of public responsibility or morale, not to say that most politicians feel bound by that same morale, but still decides to host someone on his profile, that raises flags, let's put it that way. Now, I listened to the conversation and I found most of what Vidal, so the AfD representative, said not hugely unreasonable, I have to say, with a few exceptions, of course. For one, I can testify that the bureaucracy in Germany is actually ridiculous. But the problem here is that this inevitably impacts the public opinion, and not just in a one-sided way, where an extremist party gets a one-of-a-kind popularity boost, but it also pisses everyone else off and enhances the existing divisions in the polarity in the system, which in turn pisses me off. And especially because, and I have to say this, Musk quotes in the stream Mahatma Gandhi, or what is assumed to be a Mahatma Gandhi quote, saying that an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Not that he said that it was a Mahatma Gandhi quote when Vidal complimented him for his, thought. Anyhow, but he simultaneously then makes these types of moves that are some of the most divisive in the world, and he is in general one of the most divisive personas in the world, probably. So practice what you preach would be nice. Anyhow, the whole thing is now being investigated by virtually everyone, from German authorities to European authorities to political activists, for everything from unlawful political advertising, unregistered political donations in form of this advertising boost, up to DSA violations of risk mitigation measures for large online platforms. We will just have to wait and see how the things develop, especially in light of the Musk's recent and, as it appears, permanent engagement with the US government by participating in the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, which is By the way, not an actual department, but an advisory committee that can make recommendations. But okay, point being, an attack on him is an indirect or direct attack on the US government and his buddy Trump, who had put him in there, which is problematic to say the least. Um, Briefly back to the talk. The conversation itself was, in my opinion, interesting, at least from a sociological and psychological point of view. I mean, we had aliens, Nazis, German bureaucracy, space colonization, and the Israeli, Palestine, and Russian Ukrainian conflicts, all in little over an hour. There was not a lot of political propaganda for the AfD, I have to say that, although there were some. Um, However, back to the unreasonable things that Weidel said, and to tie it back to my next topic today, in this talk, she also referred at one point to the DSA, so the Digital Services Act, as of recently in force and applicable in Europe, as ridiculous. I, for one, believe that the DSA requirements are not that ridiculous, at least not all of them. So, for instance, they are the sole reason why Meta has continued with fact checking in Europe, as opposed to the US, where they are turning it off, at least, for starters, but hopefully the DSA can make them fight fake news permanently in the EU. And when it comes to freedom of expression, which is often used as, the counterpart to this fact checking that we are demanding from them, it has its limits. In some countries, these limits begin sooner. In some countries, these limits begin later. Still, they exist and they begin with the rights of others. So, no, I cannot spread fake news, and no, I cannot defame other people because that is still illegal. And the huge companies making tons of money from people spreading these things via their channels have some responsibility for the impact of such statements. Full stop. While Meta's policy and Zuckerberg's statements were always more lenient towards not doing extensive fact checking, presumably because it costs less money or no money as opposed to fact checking, but I will come to that in a second. There has been a constant flux between the two options, usually following political developments, and now with Musk as part of the administration, it's clear which option is going to prevail. By the way, the internet has always, it has been already going wild over this. I love how these roasting meme cultures work sometimes. So again, not reading this out loud due to language, but do please check out the meme. It's brilliant. Some more background on Meta's fact checking expenses that they are now cutting for the US. So Meta's fact-checking program spans 130 countries and is the biggest single funding source of fact-checking worldwide. It came together in a matter of weeks after the 2016 US elections, which is interesting because that was the first, Trump mandate, as Zuckerberg faced intense scrutiny over Facebook's fake news problem. Not long ago, they boasted about having spent some $100 million on fact-checking initiatives since 2016, and it appears these times are unfortunately behind us. One final note on Meta and Zuckerberg, not just to trash talk them, they have apparently decided to remove their own AI-generated users from their platforms after being criticized as creepy and unnecessary, yet users were still unable to block them. Yay, Mark, look at you go. You can do it. I knew it. Anyhow, to finish with my favorite topic and featuring my favorite cartoon character, let's talk about Sam Altman for a sec. So we all remember the post from September last year when we learned that AGI is a few thousand days away. And now, as Sam recently shared some completely unelaborated prognosis in his 6-word story tweet saying near the singularity, unclear which side, very dramatic. I decided to dig a bit deeper before sharing what some of the predictions by Sammy were. So first of all, developing AGI that benefits all humanity has been the focus of OpenAI since the very beginnings, even though the ideas and the ways in which this is to be achieved and developed, also developed throughout the years since we started with a small little cute nonprofit specializing in improving deep reinforcement learning technologies way back when in 2015. Then AGI was basically, and again, according to them, the sole reason behind their beef with Elon, mostly due to the slight issue of, oh, we need a lot of money to develop AGI. And the problem with getting money for a nonprofit, though, is that not a lot of people are willing to give you money unless they really believe in your cause, and they're usually not willing to give you, you know, these amounts of money, or the amounts that would be necessary. Ergo, some sort of for-profit scheme was necessary, as there is, just not that many AGI fanatics out there. Of course, the guys had slightly different ideas as to how this for-profit scheme should look like. So, Musk wanted to put it into his X businesses, and OpenAI didn't really. So the bromance fell apart. Although when reading their internal email exchange, it does appear that the bromance was one-sided from the start. So my personal favorite of their interactions, demonstrating how different of characters we have as our main characters here, can be seen on the screenshots. And this one I can read. So Elon says to Ilya with CCing everyone basically in an email. Guys, I've had enough. This is the final straw. Either go do something on your own or continue with OpenAI as a nonprofit. I will no longer fund OpenAI until you have made a firm commitment to stay, or I'm just being a fool who is essentially providing free funding for you to create a startup. Discussions are over. 1 hour later, to be clear, this is not an ultimatum to accept what has been discussed before. This is no longer on the table. To that, Sam Altman responds a day later, I remain enthusiastic about the nonprofit structure! Exclamation point. I just think that this guy is a puppy. I don't know. I see him as a puppy. Anyhow, following the turbulence and a messy breakup between the two, OpenAI has decided on how to best fit their brand spanking new for profit entity still in an open free research nonprofit outfit. Could have been executed better, but hey, who am I to judge? And since then, we have been receiving very mixed signals from this for non-profit, whatever, open AI, AGI company, organization, whatever, as to when AGI is supposedly coming. Um, and we have basically seen everything from AGI could come soon or far in the future, um, to we are expecting it in the next 10 years, to it's coming within a few thousand days, up to we have it right here and right now, or are working already on the next step, which is super intelligence. Now, I'm not a mathematician here. That's one of the reasons why I went to law, so that I don't have to, do math. But a few thousand days should be a few years if I'm not a complete idiot over here. However, it appears that we are either building it this year, or maybe we have already built it and are building super intelligence. My main problems with this whole thing include that these exponentially shortening prognoses were not given chronologically. So the timeline and the predictions appear to be in a state of constant flux, getting bigger or smaller as they see fit. The second issue is the interchangeable use of the terms AGI and superintelligence. So AGI is defined in their charter as highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Now, when it comes to superintelligence, however, it would seem that AGI will have stages and levels, and that it can be plainly intelligent, like, us boring old humans, or super intelligent, so better than us humans. Other than that, it's not really defined, but it will be super. I'm sure of that. Finally, of course, they do want to start a public discussion as to whether the public actually wants this super intelligence, because that is terribly important to Sammy, of course. However, they will still build it regardless this year, because everyone is entitled to their own opinion and they don't really care, except for publicly saying that they care. While they do know that they will build it this year, or maybe they have already built it, they continue to not be entirely sure how to navigate or mitigate security risks, or even control any AGI they might develop. So good thing they also dismantled last year their safety advisory board. Remember the terribly cool super alignment team, as well as the AGI readiness team, because you don't want to know that you're not ready for something that you're desperately trying to develop. Um, and as their own Jan Leke from the super alignment team said once he was out of the super alignment team, God, that name is so cool. I can't believe they got rid of that. Anyhow, as Jan Lake has said in May, shiny products do take precedence over safety, and that appears to be an ongoing approach, at least in OpenAI. Maybe some other big tech corps as well, but hey, some are doing better than others, I would say. And that wraps it up for the rant. And now we can finally have our speaker join from the backstage.
Hello to you both.
Hi, Shoshana. Sorry, that took 5 minutes longer than planned. We did take a bit more time in the beginning, I would say.
I was laughing very hard. I hope that we are going to be super aligned. But I have to say, I now feel more up to date on what I consider pop culture in our vein than I might have ever been. So thank you so much.
That's what I'm here for, and also to just spend way too much time having fun.
I think your humor about it actually it pulls us back to see the big picture of what's happening across so many aspects of the spectrum that it's invaluable.
Thank you.
You know what lacks from artificial intelligence or AGI? Transparency.
I was going to say common sense, because that's something
What
we
a
can't map in the
transition.
brain. We can't map it in the brain, so we're not going to be able to replicate it. But okay, or intuition, okay. But transparency, absolutely.
Now,
Transparency.
yeah, just kidding. Shoshana, could you tell us a little bit about you? Like, who are you? I know you have done
Yeah.
so many things. You were in the cool parts of the US military. So, I mean, it's really something. I want to know more, and I think our listeners, they all want to know more about you.
Well, I can't go to the big existential question of who I am. I don't know. But I am definitely somebody who's working really hard to, as you are, to make sure that I can try to translate even the deep parts into something digestible for people around so many of the fields that I'm working in or adjacent to. So, but my background, yes, I was in the Navy. I also I have been in privacy for a very long time. I think like 150 years in U.S. law people, because I've been here for about 16, 17 years. And I've got a background in technology law. I've also built software, and so have pulled alongside this right back when we were distinguishing AI from machine learning, as opposed to calling it a subset, machine learning a subset of AI, right? And so like I've been running alongside this for a long time. In terms of what I'm up to, I work for a global professional services firm at a regional level now, having led their privacy for 12 years globally. I pulled into the U.S. region a few years ago to focus in on what we're doing, and now leading AI governance there. I also have, as Taya said, co-founded Women in AI Governance with the incredible Emerald Dalu. And that is a community that is very much about knowledge sharing, which is a critical component in this space, right? AI literacy, certainly AI governance is, both of these are very expansive concepts. And so much of what we think about, and even when we talk about transparency, is across a life cycle, right? And the life cycle here, from a knowledge sharing perspective, Women in AI Governance is very focused on allowing and fostering high trust relationships between women and allies who are in this space, or the spaces adjacent to it who also inform and work within it. That's part of the key, is to sort of show how expansive this field is, how many lenses must be taken beyond compliance, which is also the focus, the beyond compliance aspect of logical AI governance, which is really, I'm a strategic advisor there and run the training programs. So that's me, but mostly I'm just honored to be here and a huge fan of both of you.
And I'm personally a huge fan of you. I'm sure Peter can testify to the same. Maybe just as a slight advertisement for the program, I was a participant. It's a great program. Anyone interested in building something which is a sustainable governance program, which is applicable across different regulatory frameworks, should definitely check out the Logical AI Governance Program.
And I'm curious as to when and why did you choose to co-found the Women in AI Governance Initiative? I mean,
So
what are like as a kind of obviously not woman in this field, but still interested. So I'm wondering why take this approach? Isn't there like equality achieved across all topics and boards, or
such a good point. So first of all, credit always where credit is due, right? Accountability, transparency, these are the words that are going to carry all of us as individuals and certainly our organizations into the future if we want to stick around. So Emerald Deleu has been a visionary for a very long time. And she actually developed some of the first sort of GDPR focused compliance software. And she wasn't any different here. She reached out to me because we were both leading in AI governance and had already built out I had already built out both a proposed global program and the regional program for the organization that I work at, and we were in the very early stages at the end of at the end of 2023. And she said, you know, people have all of these questions. Would you like to? She said, would you like to start this LinkedIn group with me? So it began as a LinkedIn group and it grew very, very quickly. And the understanding that people had all of these questions. And if you're wondering about the why for the women piece, we were seeing and still see a lot of I'm going to say tech bros, right? Taking group pictures and saying, you know, we've been in this space, AI and AI governance is a space that we own, or these very self-congratulatory components. And we've also been in
basically
these
all
tech,
of LinkedIn?
yes, we've also been in these tech adjacent spaces or fully working in tech for long enough, each of us, that we have certainly seen the manels and the leadership where there's very little representation there. So with each of us attuned to different components here, with Emerald's sort of initial vision to say this is a space where we need people to be able to come together, but we also want to uplift the voices of women in this space. And I think it runs concurrent with the notion that sort of privacy is being told, you know, this should be your job now, right? Which isn't necessarily the case. But if that is going to be the case, where all of the questions arise in terms of, I took that, you know, I took the big test and now I still feel like I don't know how to do the job. We wanted to support that community and really lift the voices of women, though men are very, very welcome. And in fact, to be fair, we have no interest in creating a bubble. And so it's very important to us to have allies join, and we encourage and request that all of you consider doing so.
A very nosy question, and the last one on that topic,
I love
to be
it.
honest. Is there any difference between AI governance interested people's meetings exclusively for men and for women? Are they different? Do you approach topics differently? Do you have a different style of talking to each other?
So this is great. Now we're going to get into like phrenology and things, but no, actually, I think it's a wonderful question. Let me break this down a couple different ways. One, to actually address your question, certainly the issues that are considered there, right, and the things that will be flagged, and are going to be potentially quite different unless a man has taken his time to really align himself with the view of women. Women have, I promise you, taken the time to align themselves with the vantage point of men, because of the society that we live in. And I don't mean that in not every component of manhood, as it were, but we are in a society where we have aligned. The conference rooms are colder than they might be if women were running it. There are a number of ways in which we are indoctrinated, and so they might be different. But you will notice, I'm sure you're aware, that there is a level of sort of documented predisposition to synchronic thinking that benefits the species when women are both, you know, at some point historically tasked with child rearing and, you know, making dinner and keeping things from catching on fire, whatever it is, however far back we go, to the point where actually Silicon Valley in the 80s and 90s was constantly trying to hire women to deal with technology, to anticipate that kind of synchronic thinking. That said, I think, and I'm like on a filibuster here, I think the heart of your question speaks to inclusiveness, which is something that women, so it's almost like you're like pitching for me. Women in AI governance is very, very focused on, right? Which is partly making sure that we have people in this conversation, not only across a spectrum of different cultural and ethnic divides, right, and backgrounds, who identify different issues from a socioeconomic standpoint or a cultural standpoint, but also across a different set of backgrounds that don't come from privacy or compliance, because HR has a voice in AI governance, finance has a voice in AI governance. They need to understand what they're anticipating, not just for the compliance program, but overall for the impacts of AI in an organization, marketing, every single component here. And then certainly those who identify in ways that are outside of what we would call the mainstream, whatever that might be, from comic book collectors to, I think we have a cynical bastards in AI governance group. And we had an incredible, we've got a disability in AI governance and accessibility in AI governance, trying to really show and highlight that the lenses on this massive elephant of impacts and how to wrap our arms and minds around it is better understood when you combine those vantage points.
I like the elephant.
We're all
It's
here
always a good
because of the
metaphor.
elephant.
Yeah.
I hope that tackled your question. So yes, I think there's a difference,
Definitely.
but not that we can't work to think as another would, but that it's so good to go to the source in every aspect.
And one of the things that helps there is actually transparency. Because we can talk about all sorts
Let's do it.
of issues, and I mean we can also talk about there are always like objective, let's call them objective. There are always arguments being made as to why that is the case, why we have the leadership culture that we have, why there are more men in leadership positions. But the problem is that, and actually that's where technology also kind of mirrored back to us what was in society, because for instance with generative AI models and their biases, it became painfully clear how things look like, or what our society looks like. It was kind of mirrored back to us and maybe even slightly amplified. But the problem is that these types of technologies are oftentimes black boxes, all the traditional issues that we have been discussing for ages, before even we called some of these technologies AI, before we had things like the AI Act and cool stuff like that. So my question is, from a very, like, let's say, regulation neutral standpoint, how do you think that transparency can help with these issues, AI transparency? And what is even AI transparency? How do you define it? Let's frame it a bit.
I would love to jump in. Okay, so one of the important things here, I think, is to set out the adjacent terminology as well, right? So we have the three components here of transparency, interpretability, and explainability. And if you think of it as a continuum of accountability across the life cycle of the technology, that can be very helpful. You can also think of it as sort of the transparency is the how, and the interpretability is the what, and of course the explainability is the why, right? And you're really appealing to different, you have all of these, they must be intertwined, right? It's all context heavy, but they appeal to different components. So when you're thinking about transparency, you're talking, and people seize up, they say, oh my God, my intellectual property will be, they will know the secret sauce. And that's not actually true. So if you're going to have transparency, you're focused on an ability to understand and to audit. And it's also a key part at the building of the model, so that everyone on the team, right? Everyone investing, everyone on the team, everyone potentially auditing it, even internally, understands the type of model, the sources of the data, the processes that the data are going into, the objectives of the model, again, so that you can get to that next level and, work against and debug. And what is put in place and why those choices are made, in part so that you make sure that you're using the right type of model for your purpose, right? And explaining as much as you can about the processes and how this thing works without necessarily explaining every single secret sauce component, so long as you can show this to the regulators and explain what is happening. The interpretability is something that is used almost exclusively. Maybe it could be part of a deep dive audit from a regulator who'd found something they weren't comfortable with, but it's almost used exclusively for the actual engineers. And it's really saying, what is the factor weighting here, right? What are the intended and unintended causal relationships? What are we putting in place? And then, and the ability there to debug, to optimize, and to make sure that you can help translate what's happening into what's on the third component, of course, which is explainability. And the primary stakeholder there is the users themselves, which is really to make sure that just as auditors, across this whole piece, and regulatory authorities may have an interest and be able to take action and ask questions, the users actually have to have something actionable. They can accept the answer, they can contest the answer, right? And they can take action based on the answer. And you could fold in the action to the other two, but I think it's important to keep it distinct. The one other thing there is that when we're talking about explainability, which I think should be not both our focus and a bigger focus in terms of what we're doing with regulations and with fostering this as a priority from a technical standpoint for the tools, is that explainability should not only give you the context and an understanding of how the answer would have been arrived to, sort of like a credit decision, right? You say you got a bad credit, we couldn't accept your credit because of these reasons. Now you can take these actions. Give you the context, help you understand what was evaluated and why you would have arrived at this result. But also explain it to you at a number of different levels, because it has to be accessible, which is always gets us back to what you and I have talked about with agency, and understanding, in terms of you have to be able to understand it in an oversimplified way that maybe doesn't get into the granular and doesn't give you a full explanation. We just say, basically, it's because you already own 6 cars and have 6 loans, right? And then a deeper level, I don't know why I'm using this example, but at a deeper level, right, it could say, well, we've seen your history across these years, and, this is the kind of trend that we avoid, right? That we've trained the model to avoid. And then, of course, the really deeper level of explainability that might be there for the regulators when they're working with or dealing with someone who's contesting a decision. Sorry, I went on a full rant, but I think it's important to split those up and to make sure that we are as surgical as possible in distinguishing those terms, because the regulations in part are throwing those darts as if they acknowledging that they coexist, but without pinpointing them in a way that is navigable, I think, for people yet, and for technology companies. But come at me.
Like when you started explaining, I kept like walking back about 10, 12 years. I don't even remember. The first time I came across the term transparency as being something meaningful in this field, it was, I think I read a book or a paper from Solon Borocas, and then found this initiative, the FATML, the Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency Machine Learning Initiative, which I think they discontinued, and it all became part of the broader thing at ACM Fact, including the conference. But at the time, I found those their 3 fairness, accountability, and transparency. There are 3 prerogatives very interesting, because there was nothing in the law, because pre-GDPR, not much in the law about those things, especially on fairness, because in fairness, European law does not have that many rules on fairness, because it's kind of implicit as
It's
a
also a
criterion.
hard thing you have to contextualize it, right?
It is super difficult. I mean, we don't even translate it as fairness, or kind of, even though the word exists in German, we don't even translate this as fairness, but as bona fide, Treu und Glauben, into German. Anyway, what I want to say is and all these discussions, they have led to a point, right before the pandemic, there was this paper by Cynthia Rudenstub stop explaining black box models to start building explainable models instead. And I thought like we were past a certain point by saying, well, we need explainability, even though GDPR didn't manage to include it, blah, 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 until the CJEU came around. But in the end, we are still at like a very early point in these developments regarding the new wave of especially generative models that has come up and dominates our daily lives. So how are we on all those stages: transparency, explainability, and maybe also accountability? I'm seeing like it more like it's we're going back in time, not forward. That's my
It's a
feeling.
it's a reset. Well, I'm going to focus in on one piece, and Tin
Sorry, it
knows that
was
I
too much. Yeah.
no, 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 not at all, actually. No, I think, but I think there's only one piece that we can't give right now, and that is explainability. And I think these are points of like almost compulsive advocacy for me, which is that basically, if you're a developer, right, privacy by design is built into the law, like by default in design. But we saw that it is a differentiator for certain products and not at all existent in others, right? Like that's just how it played out. So that's not an option that we can have if we want to get to explainability, because right now you're optimizing this technology to do the most that it can do to try to get to that mythical, super intelligent AGI, right? So, and I love that you called him a cartoon, but anyway, but I mean, there's a lot of incredible stuff that's happening, but the AGI thing it pulls you out of suspended disbelief. So the thing is here is this understanding that explainability has to be a technical priority to run in tandem with a system, and that without some sort of an accord or a law, but I think it would be more of a global accord mandating explainability by design in all new technology as of such and such a date, because you can't get water from a rock. You can apply all sorts of tools to try to extract something that feels a little bit like water, moisture from a rock, right? But if we actually want these tools to be explainable, there will need to be something that is demanding that they begin to be that as of a certain date, or that they work on that path. And I'll dig it under to say, I also don't know without that, which is a bit of a red herring, and I don't want to distract, but without that, I also don't know how we're going to get our teeth in asking them to be less impactful on the environment, right? So where you're pushing the technology to focus on one, it's also maybe your only shot as a global universe, as a civilization, to also pull back on the other, because it's the first chance to implant there. So just a thought.
And there's going to be clash. And sorry for Thea, you can weigh in anytime you want. Sorry. I'm not interrogating Susanna, but a couple of months ago, I think it was in September last year, we received an opinion from the Attorney General at the CJEU, Jean-Richard de la Tour, in one of the major cases on explainability, the Dun& Bradstreet Austria case, where he basically said you have a right to, like, the companies using algorithmic systems, they mean ADM systems, whatever, like there is no clear terminology on that, but like Article 22 systems under GDPR, you have a right to explainability. The one decision that was taken on you with your data, with your personal data, based on your personal data, they have to explain it to you. And if you are 79 years old, they have to explain it as if you're a 79-year-old.
The
And if you're
accessibility.
12 years old, then good luck with explaining that decision to a 12-year-old person, for instance, TikTok. So that's going to be really interesting, because that's something different from the privacy by design, which was like not an obligation of the manufacturers, but just for the controllers, for the data processing. But like this time, maybe we will see some developments in this field, some investments even. I'm not sure. But also there's a problem of legacy systems that are being continued, legacy systems, inexplicable ones. Yeah, sorry. And now I'll shut up. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe just to tie back to that point. So I like the differentiation because I think that the multifaceted approach kind of allows us to talk about different things or to address different audiences, let's say. So interpretability, okay, more engineers, explainability, more oriented towards the users, for instance, and so on. And I think that kind of also ties nicely to the question that Peter also now pulled to the stream. So the question of liability for AI agents: can developers guarantee a sufficient level of explainability to settle a case? Will the box remain at least a little black despite all efforts? And I mean, when it comes to explainability as opposed to interpretability, so explainability will always be kind of a story. So, there are all these things that influence the output, and these things have more importance, these things have less. And when it comes to this little part that remains a black box or remains a black box to the user, so it's interpretable to the engineer, but it's not explainable to the average user that you have to explain it to. What does that do to our transparency? How do we fight that? What is a sufficient level of explainability, let's say?
Well, I have to jump in just because I think it's such an exciting question. So, there was an example where it was explained to me that when they were using sort of the threat actor facial recognition, I think here in the US and globally, that they found that the model, to the extent that they because you're saying that it would be understandable from interpretability, but the box is still a little bit black, right? So we can sort of sometimes imagine like a CAT scan where you can see the synapses firing. You can see what seems to be connected, but you're still not understanding all of the reasoning, right? So they were actually, the system was using apparently the faces of dogs as categories that aligned with faces of humans. So it was, I have no idea why, right? But this is what they saw, was that there was a correlation being pulled here. And when they looked at the images, people were being oriented this way. So there is something where it's once the system is making connection, a bit like I like to explain it like you raise your kids or our parents raise us, and they send us out in the world with these rules about what is right and wrong. But we still say, well, you know what? I know that's not my cookie, but I have my reason, so I'm taking it, right? And they didn't program that. It's all of your lived experiences, all of that data that lets you make that connection in your head and deviate. And that is the same sort of a thing where you're not going to be able to explain that granularly. So I think that's a good point. But the explainability, as you say, will be there in terms of this is contextually what was built and how it was put through and how this should have been weighted. But deciding a case, it remains to be seen.
Especially when trying to explain it again to
Right.
judges who maybe are older, maybe not that tech savvy, try to explain to them who should be liable or to which extent. Difficult questions.
Bar Association AI literacy initiatives become more and more important there.
In all aspects, I would say AI literacy is probably one of the most useless provisions of the AI Act, but with the best idea behind it. It doesn't tell you anything about how to do it, but it does tell you that you should be doing it. And without that, we can't talk about explainability if we don't have literacy.
I think it treats explainability sort of similarly, though.
True.
We'll see how that will turn out in the future. I mean, with GDPR, we were unable to predict the most impactful provisions, and in the end, it turned out to be 5.2, like the reversal of the burden of proof. That was kind of hidden, but that's what litigation is heavily relying on currently. And with the AI Act, maybe it is AI literacy. Maybe they can prove that, like, if you did not provide enough instructions to the users, so inside of the company, and if you or even 14, like less controllability, then you're liable anyway. Why not? I mean, we don't know. We don't know that
How
yet.
this will play out. Yeah.
So I know we're close to time, but I do want to harp in there, just jump in to say, GDPR was based on some foundational human rights that are not present. And I see the EU AI Act and all of these other laws reaching around for a tether for a right that has not been enshrined. And I don't care what it's called, but digital agency and understanding in some representation by any other name is a component that is not enshrined. And so the foundation that is trying to be built, where we say, oh, we've got everything else in place, that is probably is referencing, I think it's really worthy of considering the extent to which, if we don't enshrine that agency and understanding as a human right, whether or not the laws can actually do what they need to do and have that common grounding universally.
That's a very interesting point, and also considering the time, I think a perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you so much. This was it's always a pleasure talking to you. This was a
Thank you
pleasure
guys so
having you
much.
on. Thank you for agreeing to do this.
I'm so grateful. It's lovely to see you both.
You will be in Paris, you will be in Davos, you will be in wherever all around the world.
Paris, Davos, South by Southwest, Singapore maybe, and Seoul for sure.
So
And then
literally
of
all
course
over the
If
Brussels.
world.
people
Brussels to
want
try
to
to catch
meet
you.
up, if people want to meet up, and we are going to meet up with you, of course, Tia at South by Southwest, me some time in the future, hopefully very soon. That would be, there are so many chances. And yeah, follow Shoshana on LinkedIn and all the other channels that are available. And
Join Women in AI Governance as either a woman
Check
or
us
an
out at
ally.
least. Thank you.
would be a smart move. Cool. Okay, thanks. And well, that's it for today. See you soon.
Cheers.
See you
Thank you so much.
soon. Thank you.